Yeah.
I just think when the hiring process is going on, that it's hard sometimes to be as formal about it as you might need, or you absolutely need to be. And there's that process of crossing over between personality and being warm and trying to engage with people, which tends to lead into personal topics. And so, just it's the mindset, I think, is part of that conversation that has to take place, that you're going to be more formal than you might like to be in that process.
Well, and the record keeping, I think, is one of the critical pieces. So, the formality or informality of the interview itself is what it is, and you are going to get on these, side tracks on, I like Pacific Northwest and curling and these different things. You're going to get off on that, but the record keeping around how you make your decision really needs to focus on the skills, because that ultimately is what's going to show up if there's ever a situation. So make sure your record keeping has that formality.
And I would, just to piggyback off of that, I agree. It feels like sometimes we get really formal, and we've all heard the stories of the governmental interviews where the pitcher of water is at the same exact spot. Every person in the thermostat set for the same exact temperature, and the person sits there, and the two people sit in the same exact order, in the chairs, and it's really rigid and structured, and here are the questions. And in fact, in some cases, they provide the questions in advance to the candidate so that they can just go down the road. Well, that's not probably any of your organizations, and so while we want to have a process and we want to make sure we're consistent in it, we also want to represent the organization as who they are, and making sure that the personality of who you are as an organization comes through, so that even if your interview process isn't that I have every question listed out and I will read every question and you will answer every question, but it's more of a dialogue that you're focusing on key topics. Because what's key in this, and we'll talk about the selection, is you got to get people who fit with your culture, and formal, informal are two very distinctive, different organizations. And so you want to make sure that who you are as an organization, it comes through in that interview process without crossing any of these lines that make it an issue. It's not an easy process, an easy task to do, but it is critical that who you are as an organization does come through in that interview process.
Well, and I also want to bring up the questions that you're asking. Have a set of core questions that you've thought about that reflect the values, reflect the culture, reflect the skill set and the characteristics that you want from these employees. And you're going to ask those same questions to everybody. Yes, you're going to deviate, you're going to go off on side roads and tangents. However, have the same set of questions that are thought about in advance, which I think most of us don't do a very good job of either, that say, here are the things that I think I need to know. And whether those are behavioral, and I'm a huge fan of behavioral interviewing, where you can get a sense of how they dealt with a specific situation. That's what you're trying to get, to see, does that match with our culture? Is that the kind of thing that we would do? How does that fit into our world? We're running a little bit tight on time, and we have so much really great stuff to cover that I want to move on. Use of social media, I'm going to hit on this very briefly. It has become a part of many, many companies' job selection process, and there is a lot of dangerous roads that can go down in using it. There's been a lot of discussion about asking for, so there's two different phases, I would say. One is digging around on the internet to see what you can find. And you're going to find Facebook posts, and you're going to find LinkedIn profiles, and you're going to find a lot of stuff that may very well bring up some of these topics that you're not supposed to consider as part of your process. It's not you're not supposed to know them, but you're not supposed to consider them as part of your process. And you're going to see, if you're looking at their Facebook posts, which happen to come up on Google searches, that they went out partying last night, and here's a picture of me drunk at the bar. You may find that they are a vegetarian. You may find that they are an idea of asking for passwords and access to their social media accounts. I mean, you guys haven't heard of this?
No.
This is a fairly, it's been in the news. We actually have an article coming out in Seattle Business next month on this particular topic. And employers are trying to see how their employees are talking about them in a lot of cases, and the types of activities that they're doing, and how they're reflecting on the business. And so they've been asking for access to these accounts. And there's a number of pitfalls there. One, most social media companies have a terms of use policy that says you cannot give your password to anybody else or allow anyone else access to your account. So by asking for that, you're asking them to violate these other contracts. The third part of that is companies creating company policies that say you cannot talk about the business in social media spaces. And the National Labor Relations Board, which governs unions in the United States, has almost explicitly come out to say that social media can be an avenue for collective bargaining, allowing for individuals to talk about their business environment. And by limiting that, you're going to run into trouble with the National Labor Relations Board. So, like I said, I don't want to dive into that in a lot of detail, but just basically, you're going to dig around on the internet about people. You should do your investigation. We're going to talk about background checks. But crossing the line and asking for access to their accounts, or limiting how they can use your company name or talk about your company in their social media accounts, really is going to cross the line based on current law and current legislation. So check them out. I mean, due diligence, perfectly appropriate. You want to know who this person is. Doing background checks is very common. You do want somewhere in your process to have them say that they are authorizing certain kinds of checks. The best practice is to do it after they've been given the offer, and then the offer is contingent upon the background check, because you can't ask for their birth date before you make the hiring decision, because you're not supposed to know how old they are. So you have to be a little bit careful on how you do this, but you do want a written authorization if possible. Definitely do reference checks. A lot of companies won't give you any specific information, but you want to confirm that they are who they say they are. There are so many resumes that are not only embellished, but actually have fraudulent or inaccurate or incorrect information on them. So check their references, check their past jobs, check their education. I mean, it seems like you shouldn't have to do that, but you do. And then credit checks, I would go back to this idea of what is the purpose of doing it. If the credit check is a part of their job, they're going to be dealing with money, they're going to be dealing with credit cards, they're going to be dealing with the financial aspects of your business, credit checks often make sense. But for an individual who is just working out in the field, has no access to any of your financial information or your books, maybe you don't need to take that step. And then you need to put in place your processes and procedures within your business to create those separations for people. Yeah.
Where's the best place to go to get all these checks?
Do you have an answer? You guys probably do this more than I do.
There's a lot of vendors out there that actually do this. Tina, do you know which vendor we use? I mean, I don't know exactly which vendor, but
I do at home, I don't, not, there are times you could,
yeah.
and they're all very similar in process, and there's like kits small companies can get that, do it all, and it's online mostly, and it's really, really easy. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we can get some of those vendors and get that circulated, because there's just a boatload of them that do it. And like Tina said, a lot of it's online, so you submit the information, you get the form, the consent from your candidate, and you can enter the information online, and they'll run it, and you can choose, do you just want King County, do you want the state of Washington, do you want federal, do you want to do other states where they've lived, because obviously then it just adds to the different costs.
Yeah. And criminal information, for example, is available publicly, so through King County, but depends on how broadly and how widely you need to check. You also are going to need to know their addresses for the past 7 years or 10 years. So there's a bunch of information you're going to need to get, and you're going to want that to be asked as part of your process, so you don't have to go back to, I also need this. Oh, can you also give me, you want it to be as clean and polished as possible, so know what company you're going to use and what information you need in advance, so you can get that and you can just very cleanly go through that process.